So here's your 3D viewport, pretty classical. You have the camera movement here. Otherwise, you can use the shortcuts. So the Maya shortcuts, it's classical. It's hold Alt and then you can pan, zoom, and scroll with the different mouse buttons. And on the top left of the viewport, you have the different view types. And this is the perspective view. And you have some shortcuts to go to front camera. It's Control F. If you press Control F again, you switch to the back view. To go back to perspective, you can press Control E. And actually, if you have different cameras in your scene, you can scrub through them by pressing Control E again. Then you have Control T for the top view. Again, if you press it one more time, you're in bottom view. And to go to side view, you have Control R, left view, and Control R again, right view. So with just 4 shortcuts, you can go through all your cameras very quickly. If you want to add more viewports, you can press Control 2, Control 3, Control 4, etc. and then you can switch inside that viewport. And as you can see, there's also a full screen shortcut, Alt-Enter, which actually opens a full screen window on the side. If you select an object in the viewport, you'll see the name of that object on the bottom right. And if you use your translation, rotation, or scale, you'll see the transforms here. By default, it's global, but you can change that here and go to local. Shortcuts is F5 and F6. And in the viewport, you can cycle through objects hierarchy with page up and page down to go and select the children of an object or the parents. And of course, in the viewport, you can do your normal Control Z or Control Y to redo. So undo and redo. And for the camera movements, it's a different shortcut. It's Alt Z. So you can just Alt Z and undo the camera movement, or Alt Y to redo them. Which is super efficient if you're animating a camera and you did a move that you didn't want to do and you want to Alt Z, or if suddenly your camera is super far for some reason, you can Alt Z those moves. Or if you want to quickly alternate between a front view and a back view, you would like Alt Z, Alt Y, Alt Z, Alt Y. Very efficient. And here you'll see something else called the schematic view. The schematic view is very important. It's going to show you all the objects in your scene in the blink of an eye, and it's very efficient if you want to check the relationship between objects, or if you have some objects that are hidden or not selectable, you can still come and select them here. The models, for example, you would make them unselectable by going in the properties and viewer options and doing like unchecking enable selection. So I can't select them in the viewport anymore, but if I come back in the schematic view, I can still select the actual object. In the schematic view, sometimes you may have like objects that are super far away, like maybe sometimes it will show up like this, and it's a bit hard to manage. So you can right click and say arrange all, horizontal or vertical. I prefer horizontal personally. And you can say auto arrange. This way you can't actually, like every time you move something, it actually is going to come back and snap. And in your hierarchy, if you have objects that you don't really care about, that take too much space, see between every link here, every parent link, you have a minus. This is actually a minus sign. You can click it and reduce the view and then re-expand it if you need. And the different display modes. So for example, you can be in normal mode, you can be in see-through, X-ray, to see your bones and your controllers, or just models, which is great when you want to view your animation without any visual pollution. In the viewport, you can use the numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to cycle through the different shading modes. So if you press 2, you have the silhouette mode, for instance. You have shaded without textures. You you have wireframe with 4, and you have 6 with textures. And that depends on the selection. So if you have selected nothing, it's going to apply the shading mode on everything. But if you have a selection, it's only going to apply the shading mode to that object. So if you just want textures, here I just have textures for the floor, for instance, and you could make some controllers or some objects wireframe only if you want. You can increase and decrease the gizmo size with plus and minus on the numpad. And if you want to keep your selection but not have the gizmo show up during a playback, you can actually turn off your translate mode here, or if you're on rotation you can turn it off as well. And you still see your keys here, so you're still able to go from keys to keys, for instance. On the gizmo you have the 3 axes and you have a yellow circle around, which is screen space. So it's relative to the camera angle. So if you're in rotation mode and you activate the snapping, when you work on a specific axis, it's going to snap to a certain angle. So if you want to quickly do a 90 degrees rotation, for example, with an exact value, you can use that. So you can change the snapping value by right-clicking on the icon, and if you go to preferences and you go down, you go up to rotation snap angle, you can enter a new value, and when you press OK, this new value will show up here in the drop down. And some transforms have some options. So for example, for the rotation, you have the normal rotate. If I select my foot here, I can rotate normally. You can increase the size of the gizmo with plus or minus to decrease, by the way. And so here in the rotation, you also have the option rotate around, which is Shift E, the shortcut. You can see when I press Shift E, my gizmo becomes orange rather than yellow. And that means that if I select object A and then object B, so here the foot, then the ball, my foot rotates around the ball instead of just a normal rotation. And that's super efficient if you need to rotate the foot like this without moving the toes, or if you want to rotate the entire body around the foot like this, or if you have a weapon and you want to rotate the weapon around the tip of the weapon, you could add a locator. So you don't need to do it from one marker to the other. You could add, if you want to create a new pivot point, you can insert, here in templates, you could insert a null, for instance, parent it to whatever you want, align it. So you can hold X. So select an object, and to create relationships, you hold X and then start dragging and dropping. So you can drag and drop from anywhere in the viewport. And here I'm going to say align, transform rotation. And now I can rotate my foot around this pivot with Shift E. If you want to see the trajectory of an object, you can select it and activate the show trajectory option here. So it's only going to do it for the selection. You can have multiple objects selected, and it's going to show the trajectory. But if you want to keep the trajectory visible for an object that is not selected, you can actually go here in properties and check show trajectories. So if I uncheck that, it's not visible, but if I check it, it remains visible, unless you turn it off entirely here.